Welcome to the Black Gay History Channel. Please share this video and subscribe to this channel for more captivating content. There were so many great black gay horror moments during the Halloween season last year that I couldn't get to them all, and surely I'll have a whole lot more coming for 2024. But one of my all-time favorite horror movie franchises is Candyman. The original Candyman debuted in 1992, and I have great memories of being terrified of this movie back in my youth in Toronto. Now that I'm back in Toronto after all these years, it's fitting that I'm finally getting to see the sequel. In the very first scene, I was reminded as to why this movie was so scary to me growing up. As a kid, I'd pride myself on not getting scared of other movies like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, but Candyman genuinely freaked me out, and I didn't realize as to why until now. Candyman is all about the trauma of black boys and men, so the victims and the monsters look like me. At the very beginning of this movie, a young black boy is being enticed to take candy from a creepy older black man with a hook for a hand, who appeared out of a hole in the wall in an isolated apartment building in Chicago. This scene highlights a young black boy's loss of innocence, and we are also reminded that Candyman, or Danger, is real and can even look like us or those closest to us. Keep in mind, folks, that what makes the story even creepier is that it takes place in the Cabrini Green Apartments, a very real neighborhood in the north side of Chicago, and for many years, especially in the 90s, was considered a black ghetto. The city of Chicago and its black community has struggled with violence for years, and the Candyman and Cabrini Green folklore is an urban myth that has now become entrenched in that neighborhood's history. In the first scenes, we're introduced to a young gay couple on their way to a friend gathering, and I'll admit, I thought they were going to got within the first few minutes of the film. But luckily, Troy and Grady arrive safely to link up with Troy's sister, Brianna, and her boyfriend, Tony, our lead in the film. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who plays Anthony, and also is mentioned earlier on this channel in the perplexingly provocative Striking Vipers episode review of the TV show Black Mirror. Mateen does a great job of stumbling down a convoluted path of self-discovery sparked by a conversation the group of youngsters bring up at their gathering. Brianna, who is an art gallery director and is looking for a new art space, is warned by her brother Troy not to buy a location in the Cabrini Green area because, though property is cheap, it's also haunted. The story of Candyman always changes depending on who's telling it, but Candyman became a catch-all for the unexplained horrors of this Chicago neighborhood and would terrify the black community members who grew up there. Troy breaks down one version of the Candyman folklore by telling what happened to a white reporter in the early 90s when she tried to discover the mystery of the Candyman and wound up dead, who would also become a neighborhood hero by saving a baby from a deadly fire in the process. Tony, who's an up-and-coming painter, is inspired by the Candyman story and decides to start implementing the Candyman lore into his artwork. And of course, that's when things begin to take an ominous turn. When Tony heads to Cabrini to take pictures of the apartments and neighborhood, he meets Burke, an older gentleman who's grown up in the neighborhood, and gives Tony even more background on the story of Candyman. Again, this latest story of how Candyman originated stems from the abuses of white racism and slavery in America, and is another reminder that this film, and how Candyman is born, lives on, is through trauma of black men in America. Candyman was originally a haunting spirit who was wrongfully and viciously murdered by a mob of white men who sets out to avenge the injustices of the black people of Chicago, but will also punish anyone, black or white, who doesn't believe in him and dares to say his name 5 times in a row. Burke is played by Coleman Domingo, Emmy Award-winning actor and gay icon I've mentioned several times on this channel, and I'm sure I'll be mentioning this star even more considering these huge movies and shows he's been a part of in the past few years. In horror movies, there's usually an ominous harbinger who breaks down the story of the protagonist, and usually that same harbinger is also connected to the evil itself, which is why they usually know so much about the killer. Not only does Anthony slowly begin to lose his mind and recollection of events ever since he began painting Cabrini Green and Candyman, the gruesome murder of his overly critical art dealer and the art dealer's girlfriend after the debut of Tony's art show makes him and his girlfriend Brianna an overnight success. Now that Tony's artwork is being discussed in the media, and there is yet again violence attached to the story of the Cabrini Green Apartments and Candyman, things become even more dark as Tony becomes obsessed with the history of his latest artistic muse. I truly didn't see it coming that Burke was also a part of Candyman's fan club. Turns out that Burke was the kid from the beginning of the film who encountered the old man in the apartment walls, who would eventually become the new Candyman, which has started the latest rash of killings. Domingo plays a manipulative psycho quite well, and towards the end of the film, we realize he was well aware of Anthony and his own connection to the Cabrini Green apartments. Childhood memories Tony had forgotten, but had subconsciously drawn him towards the apartments in the first place. Not only is Domingo playing heroes in shows like Euphoria and Rustin, Coleman Domingo also has the range to play terrifying villains in movies like The Color Purple and this iteration of Candyman. Burke was using Tony's knowledge of his family history against him, leading him back to be a part of Candyman's legacy, which he was unaware of. It seems as though the story of Candyman is enough to drive many people who encounter or look into the story crazy, making them victims and ultimately monsters themselves, including Tony and Burke. I've already revealed so many spoilers from this movie, but if you really want to wrap your head around this fantastic and chilling horror movie, you'll have to watch it for yourself. Just don't say his name 5 times.